October 2023 saw the 30th anniversary of the Disney stop-motion feature, The Nightmare Before Christmas. With just an hour and 15 minutes in total runtime, it's managed to carve out a space for itself as a weird piece of pop culture history. In 1993, released around the front end of the Disney Renaissance, it stuck out from its counterparts in nearly every way but its musical structure. Inspired by a Tim Burton short story and directed by Henry Selick, it's arguably one of the most macabre family films ever made, and its aesthetic was like nothing else in the Disney canon. In this sense, a mass-release Disney film with a uniquely dark slant that appeals to the alternative crowd, its legacy is almost predictable. A movie that is both niche and alternative, and widely known and incredibly lucrative. There has never been a sequel to Nightmare Before Christmas, no direct-to-video prequel during the Michael Eisner era, no animated spin-off series on the Disney Channel, no Disney on Broadway musical, no live-action remake. Yet, Tim Burton and Henry Selick have both been opposed to churning out sequels in the past, meaning it's not as ripe for commodification as, say, the princess movies. It seems to fall under the umbrella of Disney properties that the company will only bring out for special occasions. Halloween parties at the parks, a special overlay on the Haunted Mansion during Christmas, a level in Kingdom Hearts. One might call it a member of the B Squad, but even so, it makes so much money. I actually saw Nightmare Before Christmas at one of the anniversary screenings. I didn't fully realize until after the fact that, while I had never actually seen it start to finish before, I felt intimately familiar with it anyway. I'm probably what's known as an elder emo. My iPod Classic in 2007 was full of Panic! At the Disco and Fall Out Boy. I had checkered Vans, and most of the clothes I picked out for myself came from Hot Topic. And let's be honest, a lot of them still do. And when you run in those circles, Jack Skellington's face is more familiar to you than some of your own relatives. While NBC is one of the less touted Disney properties on a relative scale, it has been slapped on endless amounts of merchandise for years. And that merchandise is everywhere, because, oh boy, it sells.
Where's the money, Lebowski? Where's the money, Lebowski?
Like I said, the movie manages to somehow be an esoteric work of art and one of the most easily recognized sources of pop culture imagery in recent years. Pictures and memes from it circulate wildly around both Halloween and Christmas. Mark Hoppus name-checks its main characters in one of Blink-182's most famous songs. It has been the inspiration for what I can only imagine are over 1 million tattoos around the world. You see, at first, Disney wanted to put a lot of space between its animation studio's branding and Nightmare Before Christmas, even releasing it under their Touchstone Pictures imprint specifically because it was more geared towards adults, and they thought Jack would make the little kids kind of freak out. But if you know Disney, you know they'll never pass up an opportunity to make a quick buck. And before you know it, Spencer's and Hot Topics at malls across America were gifted with a beautiful cash cow they could milk for years. And years. And years. And while that niche label stood tall for a while, its iconography has become so huge that it's hard to really call it niche anymore with a straight face. And this contradiction creates a question. What is Nightmare Before Christmas actually? When I sat in the theater, I tried hard to strip away all of the Jack hoodies and character costumes and Tumblr gift sets to focus on just the movie. It wasn't ridiculously hard to do, but it was a challenge. And I loved the film that I saw underneath all of that. It presents a massive world and then only tells me a handful of things about it, filling me with excited questions while still telling a complete story end to end. Danny Elfman's music and his performance as Jack's singing voice are rich and enchanting. The character designs are both spooky and adorable, the stop-motion work is gorgeous, the sets are incredibly detailed. And as I noticed all of this, I realized, man, I forgot this was a movie. We are in what many artists are bemoaning as the content era of art. Themes, technique, and other staples of artistic merit are kind of being stripped away in favor of making the most widely digestible, money-generating piece of content. Auteurs like Ari Aster can make 3-hour cinematic monsters that make you mull them over for days after you see them, but a company isn't interested in that when repetitive blockbusters with familiar characters can rake in millions, sometimes billions. In 2023, it seems like the most famous directors in the world can only hope to not bomb at the box office with wholly original, out-of-the-box concepts if they work with more modest budgets. Or just get lucky. Culturally, it feels like we're being inundated with safe bets. in a time where getting people to do things like go to the movies or buy books is challenging. One cost of this is that what works, as in reliably generates money, is run into the ground, and run quickly. This is why Nightmare Before Christmas has not only survived, but grown to become much bigger than its origins, to the point of neutralizing what made it special to begin with. I was shocked, and maybe even locked and barreled, when I sat down for this movie and was blown away by how fun and interesting and unique it was. I'd become so numb to its characters and story by t-shirts and backpacks and coffee mugs that it had, unintentionally and in my own head, become a collection of pieces for sale instead of a work of art. This is a phenomenon that we see more and more as the need to make as much money as possible, as easily as possible, becomes the determinator of art's ability to be made and be accessible. It's a widely held opinion among Simpsons enthusiasts that the show's golden age was almost an entire 25 years ago, but I can still walk into Universal Studios tomorrow and see Bart's face on any product you can think of, and I can still watch it plod along endlessly every Sunday. SpongeBob SquarePants hasn't created nearly a fraction of the cultural touchstones that its first few seasons did in ages, but it's still got spin-offs, movies, licensing deals, and lots of merchandise streaming out into the world to this day. It seems as if the fate of every bit of creative lightning in a bottle, Jurassic Park, superhero comics, Star Wars, Tolkien, Toy Story, our own human history, is to become an echo of itself with a price tag. In our current state, with the importance of profit margins seemingly inflated more and more every day, everything beautiful can and will become McDonald's. And just the same, it will be on every corner until its logo becomes nothing but noise. Suddenly, before we know it, creations that became massive off of their depth and quality become symbols of themselves, then symbols of symbols, empty of all those things that we loved in the first place. The dominance of money-making off IP is turning things into a constant treachery of images. A ce n'est pas un Jack situation, if you will. This is The Nightmare Before Christmas. And so is this. And this. But is it really? Personally, I feel like I'm more familiar with Oogie Boogie and Sally and Jack Skellington as ephemeral concepts that make money and generate clicks than I am with the actual songs they sing and their character arcs. And maybe that's a me problem. I was born after the movie came out. Maybe a goth born in 1978 would feel differently. But the fact of the matter is, art that's kept alive this long is going to suffer from different perspectives on them as generations go on. So, do we want a world where every amazing work of art just becomes a hollow product to the grandchildren of the people who saw it be made? In 1981, French philosopher Jean Baudrillard wrote a treatise called Simulacra and Simulation. It was rooted in semiotics, which is the study of how we make meaning, a field populated by other philosophers like Derrida and Barthes, who wrote extensively about the world of symbols and concepts. You could honestly pull from a lot of texts in this field to dive deeper on this topic, but we'll stick with Baudrillard. In Simulacra, he argues that in the culture of the time, which is considered postmodern culture, we had basically replaced our very reality with signs and symbols, to the point that our own lives were just kind of a simulation, an imitation of what was once real. There are 4 stages in which this happens, according to him. There is the faithful image, which reflects reality, well, faithfully. There is the perversion, a symbol that doesn't faithfully represent its concept. The 3rd stage is the absence of profound reality. This is a copy with no actual source, just an imitation of a faithful image, which is already a reflection of reality in itself. The 4th stage is what's known as pure simulacrum, where reality isn't reflected at all. You're in a house of mirrors at this point. Nothing is real, it's all just a series of symbols reflecting each other, and none of it is what it's actually trying to represent. Now, in the case of Baudrillard's original intent, the movie is already a symbol of a symbol, an example of postmodern art and culture. Using red clothes and a beard to communicate the image of Santa Claus, skeletons being linked to Halloween, Sally Stitches evoking a doll, these all draw from symbols and replications of replications. But in this context, we're just talking about the movie as an isolated world. And marketing has certainly rendered it into a symbol, a series of anonymous mascots even. When I try to figure out Nightmare Before Christmas, I feel like I'm trying to dig through a pile made up of ornaments and sweaters and water bottles, clawing around to try and find the actual reality underneath. Do any of these distortions and symbols really represent the movie? Many could identify Jack smiling menacingly on a piece of gift wrap, but could they tell you what actually happens to him? What he's like? What he sounds like? The answer is Danny Elfman. A lot of these products feel thoroughly divorced from the source material at this point. They're engaged with almost solely as symbols, and their reality becomes a simulation. Just reflections reflecting each other. Jack is goth bait. Jack and Sally are romance bait. Zero is a cute mascot. Some of the artwork doesn't even seem quite on model sometimes. It's all hollow replication. Hey look, this jar says frog's breath. They say that in the movie. It's not important to the actual plot, but they say it. You remember it. Now buy it.
You want that money, Lebowski?
This happens to a lot of Tim Burton work, as his oeuvre is often flattened into a simple aesthetic that doesn't really dive deep into themes, characters, or stories. It's just big dark eyes and stitches on clothes. This may make lots of money, but we lose a sort of reality along the way. A few months ago, I saw the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time. After 20 years of living surrounded by its symbols, I was almost surprised to see that underneath the memes and the sayings and the cultural osmosis, there was indeed an incredible series of films that I had been missing out on, with incredible books underneath that. While I hadn't realized it, some part of me had been convinced along the way that what I'd been consuming until that point had been close enough. That knowing the inside jokes and the characters' names and what they looked like was almost as good as reading Tolkien or seeing Peter Jackson's tireless effort to bring it to the screen in the best way possible. And while I hadn't deprived myself in that way on purpose, I had done myself a disservice anyway. We're drowning in symbols, symbols made to rake in money. And when we go under that water and don't come up, we're losing sight of the things that made those symbols so great in the first place. Amazing artwork. I don't know if there's anything we can ever do to fully overthrow the treachery of greed's hold on art, but on the individual level, we at least, right now, have the power to sit down and focus, and wipe away the symbols and the references as best as we can, and try and see Jack Skellington for who he really is. And we should probably do it before the live-action remake comes out.